Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content is provided strictly for educational and entertainment purposes. This video analyzes sociological trends, historical data, and demographic patterns related to divorce, and does not constitute legal, psychological, or financial advice. The complexities of family law and personal relationships vary significantly by jurisdiction and individual circumstance. You should conduct your own due diligence and consult with a licensed professional, such as an attorney or a certified therapist, regarding any specific personal or legal matters. The American dream has a hidden math problem that most of us are too afraid to calculate. We are told that the modern city is a land of infinite opportunity, where the density of people leads to the density of connection. But look at the skyline of New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles, and you aren't just looking at centers of commerce. You are looking at the epicenters of the Great American Uncoupling. According to long-term historical trends, nearly half of all first marriages in the United States will eventually dissolve. But in high-density urban environments, those numbers don't just stay stagnant. They evolve into something far more complex and frequent. We are currently living through a sociological shift where the structural foundations of the nuclear family are being redesigned by the very architecture of our cities. Tonight, we are peeling back the curtain on the statistics that nobody wants to talk about at the dinner table. We are going to explore why the same urban freedom that allows you to reinvent your career is the exact same force that is systematically dismantling the traditional concept of "until death do us part." If you have ever wondered why your social circle feels like a revolving door of relationships, or why the most successful people you know are often the most solitary, you are about to see the data that explains the quiet crisis of the modern metropolis. To understand the sociological profile of divorce in modern urban America, we have to move past the superficial explanations. This isn't just about falling out of love or irreconcilable differences. Those are legal labels, not root causes. The reality is that the city itself acts as a catalyst for marital instability. To dissect this, we have to look at the three pillars of urban erosion: the paradox of choice, the economic independence factor, and the secularization of social support. First, let's analyze the paradox of choice through the lens of hyperdensity. In a rural or small-town setting, your social pool is geographically and numerically limited. Sociologically, this creates a closed network, where the cost of leaving a marriage is incredibly high because the replacement pool is low. However, in a city like Seattle or Austin, the digital and physical proximity to thousands of potential alternatives creates what sociologists call an efficiency of search. When you are surrounded by thousands of people who share your niche interests, your specific career goals, and your lifestyle preferences, the psychological threshold for enduring a good enough marriage drops significantly. The urban environment creates a perpetual state of FOMO, the fear of missing out on a more compatible partner. We see this reflected in case studies of high-income urban professionals who view their personal lives through the same optimization lens they use for their careers. If a software update is available for your life, the city makes it incredibly easy to download. Beyond the psychological, we must address the sheer economic engine of the city. Historically, the nuclear family was an economic unit of survival. In modern urban America, that has shifted. The rise of the knowledge economy has disproportionately benefited women in cities, leading to a massive increase in female economic autonomy. From a sociological perspective, this is known as the independence effect. When both partners are high-earning individuals in a city with a high cost of living but also a high availability of services, the practical necessity of the marriage bond weakens. In a suburban or rural 1950s model, divorce often meant a total collapse of financial security for one partner. In 2026 Manhattan or San Francisco, divorce is a logistical hurdle and an expensive legal process, but it is rarely a death sentence for one's standard of living. Data suggests that as the wage gap narrows in urban centers, the divorce rate tends to fluctuate in direct correlation with female labor force participation. This isn't a good or bad thing in a moral sense, but a structural reality. People stay in marriages they want to be in, rather than marriages they have to be in for survival. Then, there is the infrastructure of the city itself. Urban living is characterized by weak ties. In a traditional community, a failing marriage is often propped up by the social control of extended family, religious institutions, and long-term neighbors. There is a collective pressure to reconcile. In the modern American city, we live in anonymity zones. Your neighbors likely don't know your last name, let alone the state of your marriage. The social cost of divorce in a city is near zero. You can get divorced in Chicago on a Tuesday and be an entirely new person in a different neighborhood by Friday, with no one the wiser. This lack of external social scaffolding means the marriage must exist entirely on its own internal merits. When the internal bond wavers, there is no external cage to keep the structure upright. Let's look at the specific demographic data involving delayed adulthood in urban centers. People in cities like Boston or Washington, D.C. are getting married much later than those in the Midwest or the South. While conventional wisdom suggests that older marriage ages lead to more stability, the urban environment introduces a countervariable: the entrenchment of self. By the time two urban professionals marry at 34 or 35, they have spent over a decade building a life that is perfectly tuned to their individual needs. Integrating two highly developed, rigid identities into a single household is a sociological friction point. We are seeing a spike in early-term urban divorces, marriages that last less than 3 years, not because the partners are young and impulsive, but because they are mature and unwilling to compromise the lifestyle they worked so hard to build independently. We also have to factor in the stress of the grind. Modern urban America is a pressure cooker of high rents, long commutes, and the always-on work culture. When you analyze the time use surveys of urban couples, you find that many are time poor. They spend more time interacting with their screens and their colleagues than they do with their spouses. This creates a relational atrophy. The city provides every possible distraction: world-class dining, nightlife, endless entertainment. But these are often parallel play activities. Couples are doing things together, but they aren't connecting. They are consuming the city together, but they aren't building a shared internal world. When the high-octane lifestyle of the city hits a snag, a job loss, a health scare, or the grueling transition to parenthood in a 2-bedroom apartment, the lack of a solid foundation leads to a rapid fracture. This deep dive is going to explore how these factors culminate in a unique sociological profile. We aren't just looking at why people leave, we are looking at how the American city has been redesigned to favor the individual over the unit. Over the next 9 parts of this masterclass, we will break down the divorce industry in these cities, the impact of digital infidelity in high-density areas, and the rising phenomenon of the gray divorce in aging urban populations. This isn't just about heartbreak, it's about the shifting tectonic plates of American society. By the end of this series, you will understand the hidden forces shaping your life, your city, and your future in a way that no census report ever could. We are moving beyond the headlines to find the truth about how we live, how we love, and why, for so many in modern America, the exit door is more inviting than the altar. To understand the fracturing of the modern American household, we have to look at the physical space where these lives are built: the high-rise luxury apartment and the dense urban micro-unit. In 2026, the architecture of our cities is no longer designed for the multi-generational family. It is designed for the high-yield individual. Sociologists call this the spatial configuration of solitude. When we examine the housing market in hubs like Denver, Miami, or San Francisco, we see a massive pivot toward one-bedroom and studio configurations. This isn't just a response to high real estate prices. It is a structural nudge that favors the uncoupled. Imagine a couple, let's call them Marcus and Sarah, living in a 600-square-foot apartment in downtown Chicago. They are both 32, both working in high-pressure tech and logistics roles. In a traditional suburban home, marital friction has space to dissipate. There is a garage, a backyard, or a spare room. In the hyperdense urban environment, there is no place to retreat. Every disagreement is amplified by the lack of physical boundaries. This leads to what researchers identify as the compressed conflict cycle. When physical space is a premium, the psychological cost of shared living increases exponentially, making the prospect of a solo apartment not just a lifestyle change, but a desperate need for air. Historical trends suggest that as the square footage per person in urban dwellings decreases, the rate of domestic friction increases. This is further complicated by the rise of the digital nomad and the remote work culture that has solidified in 2026. Marcus and Sarah aren't just living together in 600 square feet. They are now working together in that same space. The boundary between the professional self and the marital self has completely evaporated. In a sociological sense, the home has transformed from a sanctuary into a multifunctional hub of stress. When Sarah is on a high-stakes Zoom call and Marcus is trying to prepare a meal 3 feet away, the resulting tension isn't about the meal or the call. It is about the structural impossibility of maintaining individual identity within a shared urban footprint. This leads to a unique 2026 phenomenon: the lifestyle divorce. This isn't triggered by a catastrophic betrayal, but by the realization that their individual professional trajectories are physically incompatible with their shared domestic reality. We must also analyze the role of social media and the digital shadow in the urban divorce profile. In a city, your social life is often a curated performance. For Marcus and Sarah, their digital footprints create a constant feedback loop of comparison. In the 1990s, if your marriage was struggling, you compared your life to your 3 closest neighbors. In 2026, you compare your marriage to the highlight reels of thousands of people in your immediate geographic radius. The city acts as a physical backdrop for this digital theater. Case studies show that urban dwellers are more likely to engage in emotional outsourcing. Because the city provides such specialized communities for every hobby and interest, people begin to find that their spouse is no longer their primary source of emotional or intellectual stimulation. Marcus finds his community in a niche cycling group. Sarah finds hers in a high-intensity professional mastermind. Over time, the marriage becomes an administrative arrangement rather than an emotional core. Sociologically, this is known as the atomization of the family unit. The city provides so many substitutes for a spouse, delivery apps for domestic labor, specialized social clubs for companionship, and digital platforms for intimacy, that the functional necessity of the partner is slowly stripped away until only the emotional bond remains. And in a high-stress, high-comparison environment, that bond is under more pressure than ever before. Now, let's look at the data regarding the financial friction of the urban exit. In 2026, the cost of divorce in a major U.S. city has reached an all-time high, but paradoxically, this hasn't slowed the rates down in the way economists predicted. Instead, it has created a new class of the temporarily trapped. We see thousands of couples who are sociologically divorced but residentially cohabitating, because they cannot afford 2 separate rents in a city like New York or Seattle. This creates a volatile environment that sociologists call ghost households. Marcus and Sarah might decide to end their romantic relationship in January, but due to a lease agreement and the scarcity of affordable housing, they remain in that 600 square foot space until July. This period of ghost cohabitation is a critical part of the modern urban divorce profile. It leads to a prolonged state of psychological trauma and a more aggressive legal battle once they finally do separate, as the months of forced proximity turn mild resentment into deep-seated animosity. Furthermore, we need to address the impact of the gig economy on marital stability. In previous decades, a stable corporate job provided a predictable rhythm to family life. In 2026, a significant portion of the urban workforce operates on irregular schedules, multiple income streams, and fluctuating hours. This creates a synchronization gap. If Marcus is working the late-night shifts of the logistics economy and Sarah is on a standard corporate schedule, they become ships passing in the night. Data indicates that couples with non-synchronized work schedules in urban environments are 40% more likely to report marital dissatisfaction. The city facilitates this desynchronization by offering 24-hour amenities, meaning there is never a collective time of rest. The city never sleeps, and increasingly, neither does the urban marriage. Consider the case study of the relocation trap. In 2026, career mobility is the highest it has ever been. For a couple in a major city, the opportunity for one partner to take a high-paying role in a different hub, say moving from Austin to Silicon Valley, is a frequent occurrence. In a sociological profile of urban divorce, the trailing spouse syndrome is a primary driver. If Sarah gets a promotion that requires a move, Marcus must decide whether to sacrifice his own established urban network to follow her. In a rural setting where jobs are scarce, the choice is often simpler. In an urban setting where Marcus has his own high-stakes career and social identity, the sacrifice feels like an erasure of the self. We are seeing a rise in long-distance marriages within the U.S., which frequently serve as a slow-motion ramp toward divorce. The city promotes the idea that you should never have to choose between your career and your partner, but the reality of 2026 geography proves otherwise. This brings us to the concept of the consumerist view of partnership. In the modern American city, everything is a service. We subscribe to our music, our cars, our food, and even our housing. This subscription mindset has subtly bled into the sociological view of marriage. When a service no longer provides the expected utility or joy, the modern urbanite is conditioned to cancel and switch. The patience required for the long-term maintenance of a marriage is in direct opposition to the instant gratification culture of the city. We see this in the surge of mediated divorces in 2026, where couples seek to end their unions with the same efficiency they use to return an unsatisfactory product. They aren't looking for a villain. They are looking for an upgrade. But what happens when the very thing you are upgrading toward, the promise of total urban freedom, actually leads to a deeper, more structural form of isolation? What if the exit door isn't leading to a new beginning, but to a recurring cycle of temporary connections? As we look closer, we find that the city doesn't just make it easier to leave, it makes it harder to ever truly stay. But there is a darker side to this urban mobility, one that involves the invisible victims of the high-rise breakup, the shifting definition of the urban child, and the rise of the outsourced parent. And that is exactly where the data starts to get truly uncomfortable. The discomfort begins when we look at the logistics of the urban nursery. In 2026, raising a child in a major American city has become an exercise in extreme project management, and when a marriage dissolves, that project management becomes a battlefield of competing efficiencies. Historically, the burden of childcare was often absorbed by a stay-at-home parent or local extended family. In the modern urban profile, both parents are typically high-achieving professionals, and their family support network is hundreds of miles away. This leads to the phenomenon of the outsourced childhood. When a couple in Seattle or Atlanta divorces, they aren't just splitting a household. They are renegotiating a complex web of paid services, including private tutors, nannies, and specialized after-school programs that act as the glue for their child's daily life. Imagine a child named Leo living in a split-custody arrangement in downtown Philadelphia. Because his parents, let's call them David and Elena, both work 60-hour weeks in law and finance, Leo's primary consistency isn't his parents' presence, but the paid help that facilitates his movement between two different luxury apartments. Sociologists call this the fragmented upbringing. In this scenario, the divorce doesn't just change who Leo sees at breakfast. It creates a logistical nightmare where the child becomes a high-value asset being moved through a city that isn't built for his mobility. The high cost of urban real estate often forces one parent to move further away from the city center post-divorce to find an affordable two-bedroom unit. This creates the commuter child. We are seeing historical trends where children in urban divorce scenarios spend upwards of 10 hours a week in transit between parental homes and specialized schools. This isn't just a waste of time. It is a fundamental shift in the sociological development of the next generation. They are learning to navigate the city as individual units of labor and transit before they have even mastered middle school algebra. The data regarding the urban child care cliff is staggering. In cities like San Francisco, the cost of maintaining a child's lifestyle across two households can consume over 50% of a parent's post-tax income. This creates a new form of socioeconomic pressure, the child-centric financial trap. Unlike rural environments where space is abundant, the urban divorce requires a doubling of high-cost square footage in specific school districts. This often leads to a situation where parents are forced into professional roles they despise simply to maintain the geographical proximity required for joint custody. The city, which was supposed to be a place of career freedom, becomes a gilded cage. Case studies from 2026 suggest that urban parents are delaying the finalization of their divorces not because of emotional hope, but because the local rental market makes a two-household reality physically impossible. They are staying together for the zip code, not for the kids. Furthermore, we have to examine the rise of the digital proxy in urban parenting. Fast-paced city, when a parent loses their custodial time due to a work conflict, often attempt to bridge the gap through technology. This has led to the emergence of virtual visitation as a standard clause in 2026 divorce settlements. We are seeing a generation of urban children for whom the primary point of contact with a father or mother is a high-resolution screen. This isn't just a substitute for physical presence. It is a restructuring of the emotional bond. Sociologists observe that this creates a transactional view of relationships in children. If love is something that happens via an app, then the physical presence of a partner or parent is viewed as a luxury rather than a necessity. This sets the stage for a recurring cycle where the children of urban divorce grow up to view human connection as something that can be toggled on and off based on logistical convenience. Let's look at the impact on the school system. In high-density urban areas, schools are becoming the primary observers of the marital collapse. Because parents are often absent due to the demands of the urban grind, the school becomes the only stable institution in a child's life. We are seeing a rise in what is called the institutionalized family. This is a scenario where the school, the coach, and the nanny provide the moral and social framework that was once the domain of the home. When a divorce occurs, the disruption to these institutional ties can be more devastating than the split of the parents themselves. If David and Elena move to different parts of the city, Leo might lose his school, his sports team, and his social network all at once. The urban environment offers no safety net of long-term community neighbors to catch him. He is entirely dependent on the commercial services his parents can afford to keep in place. There is also the factor of the urban social echo chamber. In cities, children are increasingly raised in environments where divorce is not the exception, but the norm. This creates a sociological normalization of the temporary family. Case studies indicate that children in dense urban centers often have peer groups where more than 70% of their friends come from divorced or non-traditional households. While this reduces the social stigma, it also shifts the internal expectations for their own future relationships. They begin to see marriage not as a foundation but as a phase. This is the seed of the 2026 urban relationship model. The expectation of eventual dissolution. When a child sees the most successful, most powerful people in their city constantly cycling through partners, the concept of a lifelong commitment starts to look like a historical relic rather than a viable goal. Beyond the children, we must address the invisible victims, the social micro-communities. In an urban setting, a couple often shares a gym, a favorite coffee shop, a co-working space, and a niche hobby group. When the divorce happens, the city forces a geographical and social partitioning. One person gets the yoga studio, the other gets the run club. This is the territorialization of the city. It's a step-by-step process of shrinking one's world to avoid the awkwardness of an urban encounter. For Marcus and Sarah, or David and Elena, the city suddenly feels much smaller. The infinite opportunity of the metropolis is replaced by a map of no-go zones. This social contraction is a primary driver of the loneliness epidemic in 2026. You are surrounded by millions of people, but your usable city has been cut in half by the legal and emotional boundaries of your breakup. This leads to a fascinating and disturbing trend: the rise of the alimony-driven urban migration. We are seeing a significant number of divorced individuals in their late 30s and early 40s fleeing the city entirely, not because they want a quiet life, but because the cost of maintaining an urban identity post-divorce is a mathematical impossibility. They are moving to Tier 2 cities or suburban fringes, creating a demographic hollow-out in the urban core. The city is becoming a place for the very young, the very wealthy, and the very coupled. Those who fall out of the coupled category are often priced out of the lifestyle they spent a decade building. But as we peel back these layers of urban life, we find something even more systemic. It isn't just about the parents or the children. It's about the very way we work. The modern American corporation has become the other spouse in the urban marriage. In the next part, we are going to look at the corporate incentive for divorce. We will examine how the 2026 workplace doesn't just tolerate singlehood, it actively rewards it, and how your HR department might know more about your impending breakup than your own mother does. The data on how career trajectories spike after a divorce is a dark secret of the American economy, and it's time we talk about why the most successful people in the city are often the ones who have left everything else behind. The data surrounding the professional trajectory of the newly divorced in 2026 reveals a cold, mechanical truth about the American labor market. The modern corporation is effectively optimized for the single individual. When we look at the sociological profile of career advancement in urban hubs like Houston or Minneapolis, we see a distinct pattern often referred to as the divorce dividend. This isn't a reward for the dissolution of a family in a moral sense, but rather a structural alignment between a person's suddenly vacant schedule and the insatiable demands of high-level management. Imagine a project lead named Michael working for a major logistics firm in Atlanta. Before his divorce, Michael's availability was hemmed in by school pickups, dinner commitments, and the emotional maintenance required by a partnership. Post-divorce, Michael suddenly possesses a surplus of what sociologists call discretionary time. In a city where the grind is the primary currency, Michael's ability to stay until 9 p.m., fly to a regional office on 12 hours notice, and dedicate his weekends to deep work cycles makes him the ideal corporate asset. Historical trends indicate that divorced men, in particular, often see a significant spike in their billable hours and subsequent promotional opportunities within the first 24 months of a split. This creates a feedback loop. The workplace becomes the primary source of validation, replacing the domestic sphere that has just collapsed. For Michael, the office isn't just where he works. It is where he is still successful, where he is respected, and where the rules are clear. The city facilitates this by providing all the infrastructure needed to support a life that revolves entirely around a cubicle or a corner office. From high-end meal prep services to on-demand laundry and luxury bachelor apartments that feel more like hotel suites, The urban environment is engineered to strip away the friction of daily living for the high-earning single person. This allows the corporation to extract maximum value from the individual, effectively turning a personal tragedy into a professional gain. However, the sociological profile for women in this same scenario often follows a different, more turbulent path known as the career care gap. Case studies from 2026 show that while a divorced man's career often accelerates, a divorced woman in an urban center frequently faces a plateau or a decline due to the unequal distribution of domestic management. If Michael and his ex-wife, Sarah, are both vying for the same executive role in a competitive city, the structural reality of their divorce often favors the one with fewer primary caregiving responsibilities. In the urban deep dive, we see that the city does not provide an equal playing field for the newly uncoupled. The cost of replacing Sarah's domestic labor through commercial services is often higher than the immediate salary increase she might see from a promotion. This creates a secondary layer of the urban divorce, the widening of the professional gender gap in the wake of marital dissolution. We must also discuss the role of human resources and the surveillance of personal stability. In 2026, many major U.S. employers utilize predictive analytics to monitor employee engagement. While they don't explicitly track your marital status, they track the proxy variables: changes in login times, a sudden decrease in social outings with the team, or a spike in health insurance claims related to stress or therapy. There is a quiet, documented phenomenon where HR departments view a stable marriage as a sign of long-term retention, but they view a divorce as a moment of extreme volatility. For some, this volatility is seen as a risk, leading to them being passed over for long-term projects. For others, it is seen as an opportunity for the company to step in and become the employee's new primary relationship. We are seeing the rise of the corporate paternalism model in cities like San Francisco, where companies offer divorce support groups, legal aid referrals, and even temporary housing. On the surface, this is an empathetic benefit. Sociologically, it is an attempt to ensure that the employee's productivity remains unencumbered by their personal collapse. Now, let's look at the concept of the professionalized social circle. In a city, your colleagues are often your only friends. When a marriage ends, this creates a dangerous dependency. If Michael's entire social world is tied to his firm, he cannot afford to fail professionally. The divorce effectively chains him to his desk because the office is the only place left where he has a seat at the table. This is the atomized urban professional profile. We see this in the high rates of burnout among divorced individuals in the U.S. They are running a race with no finish line because the home they are supposed to be running back to no longer exists. The city rewards this behavior with high salaries and prestige, but the data suggests this is an unsustainable peak. Historical trends show that 5 to 7 years post-divorce, these high achievers often hit a wall of profound isolation, leading to a secondary crisis that the city's amenities cannot solve. Consider the imagine-if scenario of the digital nomad divorce. In 2026, many urban couples have attempted to save their marriages by leaning into the freedom of remote work, traveling from city to city in a desperate attempt to find a reset button. But sociologists have found that this geographical flight actually accelerates the breakup. Without the grounding of a permanent physical community, the couple is forced to be everything to each other. When that pressure becomes too much, the divorce happens in a vacuum. We are seeing a rise in jurisdictional battles where couples who lived in 3 different states in 2 years don't even know where to file for divorce. The legal complexity of the modern mobile American life adds a layer of financial and bureaucratic exhaustion that was non-existent 20 years ago. The city, which was supposed to be a playground for this mobility, becomes a maze of conflicting statutes and high-priced attorneys. The economic impact of this is not just felt by the individuals, but by the urban economy itself. Divorced individuals are the primary drivers of the rental market and the high-end service economy in 2026. They spend more on dining out, more on fitness, and more on luxury goods as a form of retail therapy or status signaling in the new dating market. The city actually has a vested economic interest in the high turnover of relationships. A married couple buys one house, one set of furniture, and cooks at home. 2 divorced individuals rent 2 apartments, buy 2 sets of furniture, and eat out 5 nights a week. From a purely GDP-focused lens, divorce is a growth industry for the American city. This leads to the most cynical realization of our sociological profile. The very lifestyle marketed to us as the pinnacle of urban success is the one most likely to lead to the fragmentation of the family unit, because fragmentation is more profitable for the surrounding ecosystem. As we look at the wreckage of these professional lives, we have to ask, Where does the intimacy go? If the office is the new spouse and the city is the new family, what happens to the way we actually connect with each other? The next part of our masterclass shifts from the boardroom to the bedroom. We are going to look at the hyper-commodification of urban dating post-divorce. We will explore the algorithms of the 2026 dating landscape that treat the newly single as a high-value demographic to be harvested, and how the concept of the one has been replaced by the concept of the next. The data on the rebound cycle in cities like New York and Los Angeles is not just shocking. It's a roadmap for the future of human interaction. We are entering the era of the disposable partner, and the mechanics behind it are more calculated than you think. To understand the mechanics of the modern urban breakup, we have to look at what happens the moment the legal papers are filed. In 2026, the transition from being part of a couple to being a single unit in a city like Los Angeles or New York is managed by a sophisticated technological and economic apparatus designed to keep you in a state of perpetual consumption. We are entering the era of the disposable partner, where the very concept of a long-term bond is being rewritten by the algorithms of the rebound economy. This isn't just about people moving on quickly. It is about a sociological shift where the individual is treated as a high-value asset to be recirculated into the market as efficiently as possible. Imagine a character named Jackson. He is 44, a senior marketing executive in Manhattan, and his 12-year marriage has just dissolved. In 1996, Jackson would have entered a period of social withdrawal, relying on a small circle of friends for reintroduction to society. In 2026, Jackson's phone is already aware of his change in status before his extended family is. Through his search history, geolocation data, and even changes in his biometric stress levels recorded by his wearable tech, the digital ecosystem begins the process of hyper-targeted resocialization. Jackson is immediately presented with advertisements for high-end bachelor apartments, premium dating subscriptions, and solo travel packages. Sociologically, the city doesn't allow Jackson to mourn. It demands that he rebrand. This leads us to the first major pillar of the 2026 urban dating profile: the algorithmic vetting process. In a dense city, the sheer number of potential partners is paralyzing. To solve this, dating platforms have moved beyond simple swiping. They now use predictive lifestyle alignment. Jackson isn't just looking for someone he finds attractive. The algorithm is matching him with individuals whose spending habits, professional trajectories, and urban mobility patterns mirror his own. Historical trends show that urbanites are increasingly seeking individualized partnerships, unions where the primary goal is not to build a family, but to enhance the individual's existing lifestyle. If Jackson enjoys high-intensity interval training at 6 a.m. and frequent weekend trips to the Hamptons, the algorithm ensures he never sees a profile of someone who prefers a quiet life in the suburbs. This creates a siloing of intimacy, where we only interact with versions of ourselves. The consequence of this hyper-efficiency is the zero-sunk cost phenomenon. When Jackson goes on a date in 2026, the sociological pressure to make it work is non-existent. Because he knows there are 10,000 other curated matches within a 5-mile radius, any minor friction, a difference in political opinion, a slightly different career goal, is seen as a valid reason to terminate the connection. In a sociological sense, the city has transformed dating into a volume game. Case studies of urban professionals in their 40s show a staggering increase in the number of first dates, but a precipitous drop in the number of third dates. The city provides so much variety that the act of choosing becomes more exhausting than the act of connecting. This is the consumerist trap of romance. The more options we have, the less satisfied we are with any single choice. Furthermore, we must analyze the commodification of connection. Urban landscape, every aspect of a relationship has been broken down into a billable service. Jackson doesn't have to worry about the domestic labor that a spouse used to provide because he can outsource it to the gig economy. He has a laundry service, a meal prep delivery, and a digital assistant to manage his social calendar. This reduces the partner to a purely emotional or sexual utility. When a partner is no longer a functional necessity for survival or domestic stability, they become a luxury good. And like all luxury goods in a fast-paced urban economy, they are subject to planned obsolescence. As soon as the novelty wears off, or a newer, more compatible model appears in the digital feed, the incentive to maintain the current relationship vanishes. We also need to look at the resumification of romance. In 2026, urban dating profiles read like LinkedIn summaries. Jackson's value in the dating market is tied to his productivity score, his career title, his fitness level, and his social capital. This creates a high-stakes environment where the recently divorced feel an intense pressure to optimize the self. We are seeing a massive spike in the urban wellness industry, driven largely by the re-single demographic. Jackson spends thousands on aesthetic treatments, boutique fitness memberships, and social coaching to remain competitive. Sociologically, this is a form of ego preservation. The divorce is seen as a failure of the brand, and the post-divorce lifestyle is an attempt to launch a successful version 2.0. However, this constant optimization leads to relational burnout. The effort required to maintain a marketable self in a city like Austin or Seattle is so high that many individuals eventually retreat into functional solitude. They continue to date, but they never fully integrate a partner into their lives. They live in what sociologists call parallel trajectories, where two people share a bed and a social circle, but maintain entirely separate financial and emotional infrastructures. This is the ultimate profile of the 2026 urban divorcee. Someone who is hyperconnected but fundamentally unattached. They have mastered the art of the rebound, but they have lost the capacity for the long haul. Consider the imagine-if scenario of the biometric pre-screen. By late 2026, some high-end urban dating clubs are experimenting with wearable data sharing. Imagine if Jackson could see a potential partner's stress compatibility score before even saying hello. While this sounds like a tool for harmony, it actually serves to further dehumanize the interaction. It turns the search for a partner into a search for a data point. The messy, unpredictable nature of human love is being systematically ironed out by the city's demand for efficiency. This leads to a sociological state of emotional desensitization. When the risk of a bad date is mitigated by data, the reward of a great connection is also diminished. The economic implications for the city are profound. The re-single population is the most profitable demographic for urban developers. They require more housing units, they consume more luxury services, and they are more likely to work longer hours. The city's infrastructure is effectively betting against the success of the long-term marriage. We see this in the zoning laws of 2026, which prioritize co-living spaces and microlofts over family-sized apartments. The city is being built for a population that is perpetually in transition, moving from one temporary union to the next. But there is a hidden cost to this high-turnover lifestyle that the GDP doesn't capture. As we look at Jackson, we see a man who has everything the city promised: the career, the fitness, the endless stream of compatible dates, but who feels a profound sense of architectural loneliness. His apartment is beautiful, but it is a transit hub, not a home. His connections are many, but they are thin. In the next part, we are going to look at the biological limit of the urban grind. We will examine how the 2026 city is clashing with the fundamental human need for deep, stable attachment, and the rising movement of urban exiles. People who are walking away from the perfect city life to find something the algorithm can't provide. What happens when the most successful people in America realize they've been optimized into total isolation? The data on the Great Urban Retreat is the most significant sociological shift of the decade, and it starts with a single realization about the true cost of our freedom. The true cost of our freedom is often paid in the currency of biological isolation. In 2026, we are witnessing a fundamental clash between the high-frequency switching of the urban environment and the ancient, slow-moving biological needs of the human attachment system. To understand the sociological profile of the modern urban divorcee, we must look at the biological limit of the urban grind. Sociologists have begun to track a phenomenon known as attachment atrophy, where the constant stimulation and transactional nature of cities like Seattle or Denver effectively desensitize individuals to the subtle, long-term rewards of a stable partnership. Imagine a character named Chloe. She is 38, a high-level creative director in San Francisco, recently divorced from a partner who shared her exact professional intensity. On paper, Chloe has achieved the ultimate urban liberation. She lives in a smart home-enabled loft, her career is at its peak, and her social calendar is managed by an AI that ensures she is always in the right room with the right people. But sociologically, Chloe is a case study in architectural loneliness. Her environment is designed for maximum efficiency, but it offers zero opportunities for the unchoreographed human interaction that anchors a marriage. In the city, every interaction is a meeting, a transaction, or a swipe. When the structure of her marriage dissolved, Chloe didn't just lose a partner. She lost the only person in her life with whom she wasn't performing a role. Historical trends in 2026 show that this leads to what is being called the Great Urban Retreat. This isn't just a move to the suburbs. It is a mass migration of the newly single, The recently divorced toward Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities like Boise, Asheville, or Chattanooga. Data suggests that divorcees in their late 30s and 40s are the primary drivers of this demographic shift. They are fleeing the efficiency trap of the major metropolis. For Chloe, the realization came when she looked at her data-optimized life and realized that while she was hyperproductive, she was emotionally hollowed out. The city had provided her with every tool to end her marriage efficiently, but it provided no tools to build a life that felt like home post-divorce. To analyze this shift, we have to look at the neurosociology of the urban environment. Human beings have what researchers call an attachment quota, a finite amount of emotional energy available for deep bonding. In the 2026 urban landscape, that quota is being cannibalized by the city itself. The constant noise, the high-stakes professional competition, and the digital saturation of the urban core keep the nervous system in a state of perpetual high alert. In this state, the body prioritizes short-term survival and status over long-term pair bonding. When Chloe was married, her relationship was constantly competing with the city for her attention. Sociologically, the city won. The result is a divorce profile characterized by relational exhaustion. These couples don't break up because they hate each other. They break up because they no longer have the biological bandwidth to maintain the connection. This leads to the rise of intentional solitude movements among urban exiles. We are seeing a significant number of individuals who, after an urban divorce, choose to opt out of the dating market entirely for years at a time. They move to smaller communities where the social density is lower, but the social depth is higher. Case studies of these urban refugees show a marked decrease in cortisol levels and a stabilization of sleep patterns within 6 months of leaving the major urban core. For Chloe, moving to a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest wasn't about finding a new husband. It was about reclaiming her own biological rhythm. She is part of a growing demographic that views the high-rise urban lifestyle as a temporary phase of life, a professional sprint that almost always ends in a personal crash. We must also examine the economic hollow-out of the urban family. In 2026, the cost of living in a superstar city has become so prohibitive that a divorce essentially forces a total liquidation of assets. Unlike in previous decades, where a divorced couple might split the equity in a suburban home and both find modest housing nearby, the 2026 urban divorcee is often looking at a choice between staying in the city as a renter for life or leaving the state to regain their status as a property owner. This is the wealth liquidation effect. Chloe's divorce settlement in San Francisco, while substantial, was not enough to maintain her standard of living as a single person in the same neighborhood. To stay, she would have had to move into a smaller, noisier unit, further distancing her from her social circle. By leaving, she was able to buy a home outright in a smaller market. The city, in its current economic form, actively expels the uncoupled. The sociological impact on the stay-behind population is equally profound. As the Great Urban Retreat drains the city of its middle-aged, experienced professionals who have been burned by the urban grind, the city becomes increasingly dominated by the very young and the ultra-wealthy. This creates an empathy vacuum. The people who remain are those who have not yet hit their biological limit or those who can afford to insulate themselves from the city's stressors. This reinforces the cycle of high-turnover relationships. In 2026, the American city is no longer a place where you grow old. It is a place where you go to be optimized until you break. But what happens to those who stay? For those who cannot afford to leave, or whose careers are too deeply embedded in the urban infrastructure, a new and darker sociological profile is emerging: the subdivided life. This involves a step-by-step process of compartmentalizing one's existence to survive the post-divorce reality. We see this in the rise of co-living for professionals, where divorced individuals in their 50s are living in dorm-style luxury buildings with shared kitchens and common areas. While marketed as a community-focused lifestyle, sociologically, it represents the final collapse of the private family unit. It is the ultimate triumph of the city over the individual, the transformation of the home into a purely commercial, shared utility. As we look at Chloe's new life in a Tier 2 city, we see a woman who has regained her sense of self, but who still bears the scars of the urban machine. The story is becoming the standard narrative for a generation of Americans who realized too late that the city's promise of infinite connection was actually a roadmap to systematic isolation. The data on these recovering urbanites is beginning to reshape the way we think about city planning, work-life balance, and the very definition of a successful life. But while the individual struggles to find balance, there is one sector of society that is thriving on this instability: The breakdown of the urban marriage has created a massive, multi-billion-dollar vacuum, and a new breed of relationship engineers is rushing in to fill it. In the next part, we are going to look at the industrialization of heartbreak. The exit lane in 2026 is not just a legal pathway. It is a frictionless, high-speed rail system powered by advanced legal technology that treats a marital breakdown with the same administrative efficiency as a corporate restructuring. To understand the industrialization of heartbreak, we must look at how the American legal system in major urban centers has shifted from a process of mediation to a process of automation. In cities like Denver or Austin, the goal of the modern court system is no longer to preserve the union or even to ensure a moral outcome, but to achieve a rapid and final settlement that minimizes the drain on public resources. This has led to the rise of what sociologists call the administrative slide, a phenomenon where the ease of the process itself becomes a primary driver of the outcome. Imagine a project manager named Brandon living in a high-rise in Seattle. It is 2026, and his marriage to a marketing executive. This leads to a step-by-step professionalization of the divorce experience. Step 1 is the digital asset audit. In 2026, wealth is often tied up in complex digital formats: cryptocurrency, non-fungible tokens, and professional reputation scores. Decoupling firms use specialized software to track and value these assets in real time, often finding hidden accounts that a human lawyer might miss. Step 2 is the behavioral sentiment analysis. Some high-end urban firms now use communication monitoring to advise clients on how to interact with their soon-to-be ex-spouse to maximize their settlement potential. They analyze text messages and emails for signs of aggression or weakness, effectively turning human communication into a strategic data set. We must also analyze the financialization of the urban divorce. In 2026, divorce has become a recognized investment class for third-party litigation funders. These are firms that provide the capital for high-net-worth individuals to pursue aggressive legal battles in exchange for a percentage of the final settlement. This creates an incentive for prolonged conflict, as the funders only see a return on their investment if the settlement is substantial. For Brandon, what started as a 3-click divorce could easily turn into a multi-year financial battle if a litigation funder decides there is a high-yield potential in his wife's future earnings or inherited assets. The legal system, rather than acting as a neutral arbiter, becomes a marketplace where the highest bidder can dictate the pace of the dissolution. Historical trends show that as the legal process becomes more automated and financialized, the rate of reconciliation in urban areas has plummeted. When the system is built for speed, there is no room for the slow work of forgiveness or compromise. The 2026 court system in cities like New York and Los Angeles has largely moved toward a mediated by default model. If a couple cannot agree on the automated proposal within 30 days, they are forced into a mandatory AI-led mediation session. These sessions use natural language processing to identify common ground, but they often lack the human empathy required to address the root causes of the conflict. The result is a legally binding agreement that satisfies the requirements of the state, but leaves the individuals in a state of unresolved trauma. This is the cold reality of the divorce industrial complex. It treats the family unit as a series of data points to be resorted. The city facilitates this because it benefits from the results. A divorced Brandon and his ex-wife will now require 2 separate subscriptions to every service, 2 separate housing units, and 2 separate sets of professional consultants. The urban economy is perfectly happy to see one household turn into 2. We are living in a sociological era where the infrastructure of the city is actively rooting against the stability of the home, because stability is less profitable than disruption. But what happens when the digital cleanup fails? What happens when the artificial intelligence that managed your divorce starts to haunt your future? As we look closer at the aftermath of these high-tech breakups, we find a growing crisis of digital haunting. In the next part, we are going to explore the phenomenon of the digital ghost in the smart home. We will look at how the 2026 urban environment makes it impossible to ever truly leave a partner, as smart locks, shared algorithms, and biometric data keep you tethered to a person you have legally erased from your life. The data on the unintended consequences of the frictionless divorce is just beginning to surface, and it suggests that the more we try to automate our way out of heartbreak, the more we find ourselves trapped in a loop of our own making. Is it possible to ever truly uncouple in a city that remembers everything? We are about to look at the dark side of the data trail, where your past relationship becomes a permanent part of your urban identity, whether you want it to or not. This is the hidden architecture of the digital afterlife of a marriage, and it is the one thing the decoupling firms can't fix. The legal decree is signed, the boxes are moved, and the physical presence of the partner is gone. But in the 2026 urban landscape, the marriage does not truly end. It lingers in the silicon and the cloud, creating a state of perpetual digital haunting that no lawyer can litigate away. We are currently observing a sociological crisis of data persistence, where the architecture of the smart city and the algorithms of our personal devices refuse to acknowledge the dissolution of the family unit. In previous decades, a fresh start was a matter of moving to a new neighborhood or changing a phone number. Today, your urban identity is a composite of a decade of shared data, and the machine has a very long memory. Imagine a character named Sophia. She is a 34-year-old architectural consultant living in a high-tech condo in Miami. Her divorce from Javier was finalized 6 months ago. She has done everything the decoupling consultants suggested. She changed her passwords, she removed him from her social media, and she even redecorated the living room. But Sophia lives in an ambient intelligence environment. Her home is an IoT-enabled ecosystem, designed to predict her needs based on 5 years of historical trends. When she walks into the kitchen at 7 p.m., the smart lighting still automatically dims to the warm, intimate setting Javier preferred for dinner. The smart refrigerator, noticing the absence of his favorite items, sends persistent notifications to Sophia's phone, suggesting she is running low on products she no longer buys. This is what sociologists call algorithmic grief. The environment is constantly reminding her of a void, not because it is sentient, but because its predictive models are lagging behind her lived reality. The friction of the 2026 urban divorce is amplified by the sheer volume of collaborative filtering that governs our lives. Every streaming service, every grocery delivery app, and every fitness tracker Sophia uses was built on the data of a couple. When the algorithm suggests a movie for Saturday night, it isn't suggesting what Sophia wants. It is suggesting what the composite entity of Sophia and Javier used to want. To truly uncouple in this environment, Sophia would have to delete her entire digital history and start from scratch, effectively erasing her professional reputation scores and her consumer preferences. Most urban professionals cannot afford this digital suicide. They are forced to live with the ghost of their marriage, experiencing a series of micro-traumas every time an app serves up a memory or a suggestion rooted in their past life. Beyond the home, we must analyze the surveillance of the social circle. In a hyper-connected city, the concept of a clean break is a sociological myth. The social media platforms of 2026 are more aggressive than ever in their attempt to drive engagement through connectivity. Sophia finds that even after blocking Javier, the algorithm continues to suggest his new colleagues and friends as people you may know. This is because their GPS coordinates still overlap at the same high-end gym or the same specialized coffee shops in downtown Miami. The city's density, combined with the algorithm's desire to create networks, forces an involuntary proximity. Case studies indicate that this leads to a phenomenon known as digital paranoia, where divorced individuals feel they are being watched or followed by their ex-spouse's digital shadow, even when there is no intentional contact. This leads us to the technicality of the digital hostage scenario. In 2026, many urban couples have consolidated their lives under single-family plans for cloud storage, insurance, and utility management. When a split occurs, the administrative nightmare is staggering. If Javier was the primary account holder for the home's smart security system, Sophia might find herself unable to change the access codes to her own front door without his digital consent. We are seeing a rise in legal cases involving digital gatekeeping, where an ex-spouse uses their control over shared smart infrastructure to exert psychological pressure. Historical trends suggest that the legal system is struggling to keep pace with this. While a court can order the division of a bank account, it is far more difficult to order the clean partitioning of a neural network that has been trained on 5 years of a couple's shared behavior. Furthermore, we need to examine the impact of the data brokerage of disruption. Marketing firms in 2026 are predatory in their pursuit of the newly single demographic. When Sophia's data patterns shift, when she stops ordering for two, when her late-night browsing habits change, this information is sold in real time to firms that specialize in the rebranding of the individual. Within 48 hours of her status change, Sophia's feed is flooded with advertisements for solo travel, luxury dating apps, and even aesthetic surgery. This creates a sociological state of forced reinvention. The city, through its commercial interests, is telling Sophia that her value as a coupled person has expired, and that she must now invest heavily in her new identity as a single urbanite. This isn't just marketing. It is a structural pressure to consume her way out of her grief. reinforcing the idea that the partner was a disposable asset and the individual is a product that needs an upgrade. Consider the imagine-if scenario of the biometric divorce. By 2026, many workplaces and high-end residential buildings use facial recognition and biometric sensors for access. If Sofia and Javier shared a membership to an exclusive co-working space, the system may still associate their biometrics as a single billing unit. If Javier's credit score drops post-divorce, it could potentially trigger a security flag for Sofia's account due to the residual data links in the city's private surveillance networks. The city doesn't just remember who you were, it assumes that who you were is who you will always be. The sociological profile of the urban divorcee is thus one of a person fighting a machine for the right to be seen as an individual. In the realm of co-parenting, the digital haunting takes an even more invasive form. The apps designed to manage shared custody, such as the 2026 versions of AI-mediated communication platforms, create a state of digital incarceration. If Sofia and Javier have children, their movement throughout the city is tracked and logged in a shared database to ensure compliance with the custody agreement. Every time Sofia takes the children to a park, Javier receives a notification. While this is marketed as a tool for safety and transparency, sociologists observe that it prevents the emotional closure necessary for a healthy post-divorce life. They are legally separate, but they are geographically and digitally tethered in a way that previous generations would have found suffocating. The city becomes a giant game of geofenced parole. As we look at the data, we find that this inability to truly disconnect is a primary driver of the loneliness epidemic in 2026. People are staying in a state of arrested development, unable to move forward because their environment is literally built on their past. The urban divorcee is a person living in a museum of their own failed relationship, curated by an algorithm that doesn't understand the concept of a broken heart. But there is an even more profound shift happening beneath the surface of the smart city. While individuals like Sofia and Brandon struggle with the digital ghosts of their past, the very concept of what it means to be a person in a city is changing. The city is beginning to favor those who live without history, the ultra-mobile, the data light, and the perpetually unattached. In the next part, we are going to look at the rise of the urban solitude economy. We will explore how the American city is being redesigned to cater specifically to the solitary individual, from the rise of solo dining pods to the emergence of the professional companion industry. What happens to a society when the city itself decides that being alone is the most efficient way to live? The numbers on the growth of the solitude market are the most telling statistic of all, and they point to a future that looks very different from the one we were promised. Is the modern American city actually building a world where intimacy is a bug, not a feature? We are about to look at the architectural and economic blueprint for a life lived entirely alone, and why for many in 2026, that is becoming the only viable potential outcome. This viable potential outcome is what sociologists now call the unit of one architecture. In 2026, if you walk through the newly developed districts of Nashville, Phoenix, or Philadelphia, you are witnessing the physical manifestation of the post-divorce reality. The city is no longer being designed to support the sprawling, messy needs of a nuclear family. It is being precision-engineered to cater to the high-spending, low-friction lifestyle of the solitary individual. This is the rise of the solitude economy, a market sector that thrives on the breakdown of the domestic unit and the commodification of what used to be free human interaction. Imagine a 42-year-old software architect named Alex living in a high-rise in Austin. Alex is 2 years post-divorce. In 1950, a man in Alex's position would have been a social outlier, a figure of pity or concern. In 2026, Alex is the primary target demographic for the urban developer. His apartment is a smart microstudio, a 400-square-foot marvel of efficiency where the bed folds into the wall, and the kitchen consists of high-end appliances designed for single-serving gourmet meals. There is no dining table because Alex never hosts dinner parties. There is no guest room because Alex's social life happens entirely in the public-private hybrid spaces of the city. The sociological shift here is profound. Historically, the home was the center of social production. In 2026, the urban home is merely a charging station for the individual. This architectural shift creates a feedback loop that makes reconciliation or remarriage statistically less likely. When your physical environment is perfectly tuned to your individual whims, the temperature, the lighting, the lack of clutter, the prospect of reintroducing another human being's preferences feels like a systemic intrusion. Case studies of long-term urban singles show that the longer an individual lives in a solo-optimized environment, the more their relational tolerance diminishes. They aren't just choosing to be alone, They are being biologically and psychologically conditioned by their architecture to find the presence of others exhausting. To analyze this further, we must look at the solo dining pod phenomenon. In 2026, the most successful restaurants in San Francisco and New York are not those with large communal tables, but those offering high-end, private booths for one. These pods come equipped with noise-canceling technology, integrated screens, and high-speed data ports. You can consume a $100 meal while remaining entirely insulated from the social environment. From an economic perspective, this is a masterclass in efficiency. A table of 4 stays for 2 hours and orders a bottle of wine to share. 4 individuals in 4 separate pods stay for 45 minutes, consume 4 separate high-margin cocktails, and rotate out quickly. The city's business model is optimized for the high-velocity individual, not the slow-moving family unit. But what happens to the human need for companionship? This is where we see the rise of the social proxy industry. In 2026, if Alex needs to attend a high-stakes corporate gala or a friend's wedding, he doesn't scramble to find a date or worry about the emotional complexity of a new relationship. He opens an app and hires a professional companion. These are not romantic workers in the traditional sense. They are highly trained social aestheticians. They are individuals with vetted intellectual profiles, specific aesthetic standards, and high levels of social intelligence who are paid to provide the appearance of a coupled status without any of the legal or emotional liabilities. This is the ultimate lifestyle decoupling. You can buy the social capital of being a couple for a 6-hour block, and then return to the total freedom of your microstudio. Historical trends suggest that as these services become more normalized, the incentive to engage in the difficult, uncompensated work of maintaining a real marriage continues to decline. Why deal with the irreconcilable differences of a real spouse when you can hire a perfect partner for the evening and write it off as a professional expense? The city has turned the most intimate aspect of human life into a subscription service. The data on the urban single tax is also a critical component of this profile. In 2026, it is mathematically more expensive to be single, yet more people are choosing it. This is because the city has designed its cost structure to penalize the family unit. School taxes, the high cost of multi-bedroom units, and the scarcity of family-oriented transit make the family unit a high-overhead enterprise. Conversely, the unit of one is agile. Alex can move from Austin to Denver in a weekend because his entire life fits into a single shipping container. He is the ultimate liquid asset in the global economy. Sociologists observe that the modern city is effectively a filter. It attracts the young and the coupled, extracts their peak productivity, and then uses the high cost of living to fragment them into 2 separate, more profitable consumer units. Furthermore, we must address the digital bubble of the public square. In 2026, even when Alex is in a crowded urban park or a bustling transit hub, he is in a state of functional isolation. His augmented reality glasses and his spatial audio earbuds allow him to overlay his own curated digital environment onto the physical city. He doesn't see the homeless person on the corner. He sees a digital advertisement or a serene landscape. He doesn't hear the noise of the city. He hears his personalized focus playlist. This hyper-individualized perception means that the social control that once held marriages together, the shared gaze of the community, no longer exists. In the city, you are invisible unless you choose to be seen. This invisibility is a superpower for the individual, but it is a death sentence for the collective responsibility of the family. Step by step, the city is removing the friction of loneliness. If Alex feels a pang of isolation at 2 a.m., he doesn't need a spouse. He has an AI-driven empathy bot that has been trained on his specific psychological profile to provide the exact level of comfort he requires. He has virtual reality experiences that can simulate the feeling of a crowded room or a quiet, intimate conversation. The city provides the synthetic substitute for every human need. We are moving toward a potential outcome where the marriage is seen as an inefficient, analog solution to a set of problems that the city has already solved with digital and commercial products. But as we look at this blueprint for a life lived entirely alone, we have to wonder, what is the end state? If we have successfully optimized the individual and eliminated the friction of the family, what happens to the actual fabric of the human species? The data on the urban fertility collapse of 2026 is the final piece of the puzzle. In cities where the solitude economy is most advanced, the birth rate has dropped to levels that were previously unimaginable. We are building beautiful, high-tech, efficient cities that are effectively demographic dead ends. As we move into the final part of this masterclass, we are going to pull all these threads together. We will look at the grand synthesis of the urban divorce profile. We will explore whether the American family can survive the 2020s, or if we are witnessing the birth of a new kind of human being, the post-relational urbanite. We will look at the emerging resistance movements, the neo-tribal communities that are trying to rebuild the family in the ruins of the high-rise, and the ultimate question: in a world where you can have everything alone, is there anything left worth sharing? The conclusion of this deep dive is not just about the end of a marriage. It is about the beginning of a new era of human history, and the stakes couldn't be higher. What is the final cost of the perfect urban life? We are about to look at the one thing the data can't ignore: the future of the American spirit in an age of total autonomy. Are we becoming more free? Or are we just becoming more manageable? The final part of our profile will reveal the true destination of the road we are on. The destination of the road we are on is a sociological state known as the manageable individual. In 2026, we must recognize that the ultimate potential outcome of the urban divorce trend is not just personal liberation, but a fundamental restructuring of the American citizen into a more predictable, more taxable, and more consumable unit of labor. To understand this grand synthesis, we have to look at the final profile of the post-relational urbanite. This is an individual who has transitioned through the high-stakes career grind, the algorithmic dating cycles, and the automated legal system to arrive at a state of total autonomy. But sociologically, this autonomy is a double-edged sword. While it offers a life without the friction of a partner's competing needs, it also removes the primary buffer between the individual and the state. Imagine a character named Jordan. He is 48, living in a luxury high-rise in Charlotte, North Carolina. After 2 urban marriages and 2 efficient divorces, Jordan is the personification of 2026 success. He is highly mobile, he has no domestic anchors, and his entire existence is facilitated by a suite of high-end subscriptions. From a data-driven perspective, Jordan is the perfect citizen. He is easier to track because his life follows a linear solo pattern. He is easier to sell to because he has no one to consult before making a purchase. He is, essentially, a frictionless node in the urban machine. Historical trends suggest that the rise of the single-person household in the United States is not an accident of culture, but a requirement of a modern economy that values flexibility above all else. Jordan can relocate to a new city for a promotion tomorrow because he has no one to leave behind. He is the ultimate liquid asset. However, the cost of this manageability is the total erosion of the private sphere. When the family unit dissolves, the responsibilities that once belonged to the home, care for the elderly, the raising of children, the emotional support of the sick, are transferred to the market and the state. In Jordan's world, there is no one to care for him if he falls ill except for a paid concierge or a state-funded service. This is the commodification of the life cycle. The city has successfully replaced the organic, unpaid labor of the family with a series of high-margin services. Case studies from 2026 indicate that the divorced urban population is the fastest-growing consumer of professional health management and end-of-life planning services. The city didn't just make it easier to leave a marriage, it made it profitable for you to be alone. This leads us to the 2026 urban fertility collapse. In cities where the divorce rate is highest and the solitude economy is most advanced, the birth rate has fallen to levels that sociologists call demographic stasis. When a society optimizes for the individual, it systematically deprioritizes the future. For Jordan and millions like him, the idea of having children in an urban center feels like a structural impossibility. The high cost of real estate, the professional penalty of parenthood, and the lack of a stable partner create an environment where the next generation is simply not being born. The American city in its current form is a demographic dead end. It is a place that consumes people's peak productivity and then offers no mechanism for their renewal. We are building massive high-tech monuments to the present, while the future is quietly being hollowed out. Yet, within this landscape of isolation, we are seeing the emergence of the neo-tribal resistance. This is one of the most fascinating sociological developments of 2026. A small but growing number of urbanites, exhausted by the cycle of uncoupling and digital haunting, are attempting to build new structures of belonging that bypass the traditional nuclear family. We are seeing the rise of co-housing cooperatives in cities like Minneapolis and Portland, where groups of divorced individuals and single professionals are buying entire buildings to share domestic labor, childcare, and social support. These are not the communes of the 1960s. They are high-tech, professionally managed microvillages. They represent a desperate attempt to find the village that the city destroyed. The data on these intentional communities shows a marked improvement in mental health and a significant decrease in the cost of living. But they also face immense legal and structural opposition. Zoning laws in 2026 are still largely designed for either the nuclear family or the solo individual. These new tribal structures are a threat to the solitude economy because they reduce the need for outsourced services. If you can rely on your neighbors for childcare or emotional support, you don't need a subscription app or a professional consultant. The battle between the individualized city and the neo-tribal community is the defining sociological conflict of our decade. As we conclude this deep dive, we have to address the question of the American spirit. For 2 centuries, the United States was defined by its ability to build communities, churches, unions, neighborhoods, and families. The modern urban profile of divorce suggests that we have pivoted toward a new definition of the American dream, the dream of total unencumbered self-actualization. But as we see in the lives of Chloe, Marcus, Sarah, and Jordan, this dream often ends in a state of architectural loneliness. We have optimized for the I at the expense of the we, and the result is a society that is hyper-efficient but fundamentally disconnected. The final sociological truth of 2026 is that the city is a mirror. It reflects back to us the values we have chosen. If we value career mobility over commitment, the city will provide the exit ramps. If we value consumer convenience over communal friction, the city will provide the solo dining pods. The divorce rate in modern urban America is not a sign of moral failing. It is a sign of a successful architectural and economic project. We built a world where it is easier to leave than to stay, and now we are living in the results of that success. But the road doesn't have to end here. The data suggests that we are hitting a saturation point. The loneliness epidemic, the fertility collapse, and the rise of the resistance movements all point to a coming correction. Human beings are biologically incapable of thriving in total isolation for long. The next decade will not be about finding new ways to divorce. It will be about finding new ways to belong. It will be about redesigning the city to support the bond instead of the break. Whether that happens through a return to traditional structures or the birth of something entirely new is the open loop of our generation. The story of divorce in modern urban America is the story of us trying to find out who we are when all the old structures are gone. It is a painful, expensive, and deeply revealing journey. But as we look at the skyline of the 2026 city, we have to ask ourselves, now that we are finally free to be anyone we want, who is it that we actually want to be? And more importantly, who is going to be there to see us when we finally figure it out? The cycle of uncoupling has reached its peak, but a new movement is forming in the shadows of the high rise. They call it the Great Reconnection, and it is the only thing the algorithm didn't see coming. In our next masterclass series, we will investigate the rise of the post-digital community and the secret groups that are deleting their dating apps to build a future that no data broker can track. The era of the individual is ending, and what comes next will change the American landscape forever.